You're listening to the Membership Geeks podcast, bringing you proven practical tips and advice from the leading experts on growing a successful membership business.
Hey there, membershippers. Welcome to this episode of the Membership Geeks podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morrison, founder of the Membership Geeks and Membership Academy. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If you're a brand new subscriber, then you have found the number one podcast for online membership businesses. And I would urge you to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss a single weekly episode of the show. This is all stuff that you already know. If you've been a long-term subscriber, you know that we deliver those proven practical tips and advice for growing your membership business each and every week. If the show has helped you, if you enjoy what we teach, you've been able to use it in your own membership business, it really would mean so much for me if you would leave a nice rating and review to let me know that I'm doing my job and helping you with your membership business, but also to enable us to reach more people. The more reviews we have, the more those podcast gods will smile on us and ensure that other people can find us easily too. So if you can find the time, just a minute or two of your time, to leave a nice shiny 5-star review and a few kind words, it would really mean so much. If you do, be sure to hit me up on social media at Membership Geeks so that I can thank you personally. I do read each and every review, and honestly, I do appreciate them. They mean so much. Today's a bit of a special episode, and we're going to be kicking off a series of very special episodes as we draw close to the 10th anniversary of Membership Academy. I know, I don't look old enough to have been doing this for 10 years, right? Okay, you shouldn't have been laughing that hard at that comment. But yeah, 10 years ago, we were gearing up towards launching Membership Academy. We were at the time known as the Membership Guys, not the Membership Geeks. And there was a the in the business name. There was a the in the domain name. We were a little bit like Facebook at the time, which was originally the Facebook. And our academy was actually, it was going to be called Membership Academy from the get-go, but there was a little bit of a mix-up with domain names, and it ended up being Member Site Academy, which was definitely a little clunkier, a little less in line with what we wanted to be called. Like, I was so annoyed when we realized there was a mix-up and that we couldn't actually roll out as Membership Academy, because that is what it was designed as. The earliest versions of our logo that we end up using for Member Site Academy was Membership Academy. Our courses had to be re-recorded and all of that. But anyway, this was 10 years ago. We were gearing up for the launch of the Academy. The Membership Guys as a brand had existed since June of 2015, I believe. The podcast launched around about that time, so we're over a decade of this podcast too. And we were working towards a launch at the end of August. So to celebrate being 10 years of membership, member site, whatever it is, the Academy, the number one training community for online membership owners, we've got a very special month ahead. There's going to be lots of things that are going to be coming out. There's going to be lots of announcements, lots of exciting content. And right here on the podcast, really for the next 6 episodes, including this one, we are sharing insights, sharing predictions, bringing in some of our friends within the online business world to give their predictions. We're going to be taking a look back, a bit of a deep dive into the last year of Membership Academy. That's something we do every single year. We've got a decade of those little recaps. And yeah, we're going to be announcing some pretty huge things. But today, I wanted to talk about the ugly stuff, the hard stuff, the difficult things that I've had to deal with as a membership owner over the last 10 years. You know, people don't talk about the ugly stuff. They don't talk about the difficulties. Usually they just talk about all the great things they've done, the success that they're achieving and all that sort of stuff. But if you've been listening to us for a while, you'll know that I never shy away from the uglier side of the membership world of business, and I always give it to you straight. So I thought, you know what, let's look at some of the hardest things that I've had to do, not just to hopefully give a bit of insight into how I was able to navigate them, and to pull back the curtain on some things that we might not have spoken about publicly, but also just to kind of demonstrate and illustrate that if you are also dealing with some real difficult things, if stuff hasn't quite worked out, if you've had setbacks, that's normal. That's just par for the course of being a business owner, let alone a membership owner. So yeah, I thought that was a nice little way to kick off what will be a month of insights, behind the scenes, glimpses, and just special content and exciting stuff we're going to be announcing to mark a decade of showing up and serving you, my fantastic cohort, my fantastic peers in this wonderful world of memberships. So I think the hardest thing, the first real hard thing, happened right at the beginning of the journey. We never really planned or expected the Academy to become the center of our business. Back when we first started out, and I've talked about this before, the idea was that the main bread and butter for the business would continue to be consulting, would continue to be working one-on-one with clients, both building their membership businesses from a technical point of view, but also from a strategic point of view, and then being hands-on, directly involved in their company to help with the ongoing operations, with the marketing, with retention and all of that, because that's what we've been doing up to that point. We had some high-profile clients that were very lucrative for us. And so we didn't start a membership to kind of tap into a whole new level of revenue. We were already successful. We started the blog initially, and then the Facebook group. They were actually used to drive traffic and generate leads and customers for our agency. But what we found was we couldn't help everyone. Some people who wanted help, they just didn't have the budget, but also we were over capacity. We were at our limit for how many clients we could take on. So we wanted to send people somewhere. We wanted to refer them to another membership or a course. But when we researched what else was out there, there was nothing. There was nothing we'd have felt comfortable sending people to who we couldn't work with one-on-one to at least make sure that, they were getting help elsewhere. So we created our Membership Academy. We created that almost to address that need, but also as just part of the business, as another revenue stream that we never thought would be anything more than maybe accounting for 20 to 30% of what we did. But it very, very quickly became evident that that wasn't going to be the case. We blew up. It really blew up. We generated so much momentum, built so much traction that it really, after maybe 5 or 6 months, became apparent this is our business. And we started moving away from the agency. And to be honest, it was the best kind of move. We sort of tried to balance the two for a little while, but the more the membership took off, the more we could see the difference in quality of life, of fulfillment, of enjoyment between running the membership and actually doing the one-on-one work. And I, in particular, hit that brick wall with working with clients. But the hard thing was that we had a number of clients who, because of the fact we had a wait list for our services, they had paid a deposit, in some cases 50% of their total project fee, so tens of thousands in some cases. They paid deposits, but the work hadn't yet started. In some cases, that was because of us. We'd agreed on a timeline of when we'd be available to start, but in other cases, we had one client in particular who had paid their deposit almost a year beforehand, but they kept dragging their feet on when they were ready to start. And while we should have nipped that in the bud, to be honest, we didn't mind the fact that they were delaying things a little bit because we had other stuff on our plate and we could always rejig some stuff. But it got to the point where those clients, and there was a few projects that hadn't started, but we were wanting to move away from client work, but we couldn't because we still had to honor these projects. People had paid their deposits. Our membership was very quickly becoming apparent, this needs all of our time and attention. But we couldn't totally move away from client work because we had 3 or 4 clients where we were committed, we were obligated, they had paid us 50% in some cases of their project fee. So we couldn't turn back unless we gave all that money back. And that's what we ended up doing. Now, that was hard. Financially, that wiped us out. Because, of course, if you work with clients one-on-one, people pay their deposits. That money doesn't just sit there, right? You don't just sit with that money in the account until the project's done. You spend it. It becomes part of your cash flow. And that had been the case, especially with that one big client who paid their deposit like a year prior. That money was gone. So paying those deposits back really did wipe us out. The membership wasn't yet at a point where, it was a non-issue to pay back 30 grand in deposits. But we kind of had to do that because there was no end in sight. There was no predicting when those projects were actually going to get moving. And so because of that, we always had the trepidation. We always had that albatross, that sword hanging over our head, that, if we go all in and put all of our attention into the membership and we shut down the agency, that is probably going to be the day that these people turn around and say, okay, we're ready to start. And had they said they were ready to start at any point, I don't think we could have given them the full attention if we had gone all in on the membership. So we had to bite the bullet. We had to rustle up that money and give that all back. And that was scary. Of course, entrepreneurship is risky. There's always things can go wrong. You're always taking a risk that things won't work out. But this was very much a kind of, you're throwing away any safety net, any security, a guaranteed project, not just losing the money that you'll get when the project's done, but actually handing back cash that is all you have right now. So that was the hardest thing to do, right from the get-go. That was just a couple of months in, a few months down the line. But that had to be done in order to enable us to go all in. And obviously that paid off, but we didn't know that it would pay off. We were just this little outfit from the UK. Everyone else in the online business world was from the US. We didn't think we would ever become that successful with the membership. We didn't really think that, it was going to be the be-all, end-all of everything we did, that it would grow to what it grew to, that it would be as financially successful as it was, or anything like that. We had no guarantees. And so that was hard. That was really hard. The risk was worth it. It was a calculated risk. It was a measured risk. Obviously, it was a risk that we entered into because of the momentum that was being building in the membership. But we all know momentum stops. That momentum could just as easily have ran out the second that the bank transfer went through. So that was definitely the first real hard thing that we had to do, taking that risk. Thankfully, it did pay off, but that was dicey, and there was definitely a period where things were really, really tight financially for us. So, of course, that all worked out. That went well for us. The risk was worth it. It was a hard thing to do, but it was worth doing. And that first year really was an exciting one for us. That momentum built so much quicker. We made breakthroughs that we didn't expect to make. We grew beyond our expectations. We totally changed our business model, and all things are going well. But then I think probably the second of the hard things that we've had to do over the last decade came about, I think it was just short of a year after we first launched. And really it felt like such a setback, a bit of a body blow, and it was really demoralizing. So we'd spent a lot of that first year trying to build relationships, trying to really carve out our space in the online business world. We were outsiders. We were not people who'd cultivated connections and a personal brand. We hadn't built a presence. We had zero visibility in the online business space before we started Membership Geeks. And this was all done the hard way. We had to fight, scratch and claw to make noise and be visible in any way, shape or form. And we were starting to make some headway. We were making good friendships. We were amassing kind of like a good, loyal following. We'd helped people achieve things with their membership. They were getting success and results because of us, and they were thanking us for that personally. But then somebody entered the market who had a lot of funding. They had a lot of money behind them from a previous business that they'd sold their shares in, millions of dollars in funding. They had a lot of connections that they had gained through mutual associates. And a lot of these people were kind of bigger names in the online business world who we'd either just kind of started building our relationship with and just started establishing ourselves with as, the voices on memberships. This person already had those connections. They had one or two key business relationships that kind of opened the doors to those bigger names. And they also came in with a product that they were selling for thousands of dollars. So they were teaching memberships, but they were doing it via a course where they were charging $2,000. And of course, the main thing that enabled them to do was offer a huge commission to anyone who referred customers to them. So they kind of came in using that old school internet marketing approach of the $2,000 course with the big name affiliates who were all promoting it because they stood to earn $1,000 for every sale that they referred. And as outsiders, as people who were kind of scrapping and scraping to make our way and do things right, who were selling a $39 a month membership at the time, we just couldn't compete with that. We couldn't compete with the black book, the huge financial backing, and the fact that they could incentivize others to portray them as this ever-knowing, all-knowing guru and fast-track them to their place in the industry by paying them $1,000 for every customer that they referred. So that was a bit of a body blow. Now, it didn't really directly affect our business, but it was impactful on a few fronts. First and foremost, we were really making headway with influencers, with people who were seeing the work that we were doing, and they were very much touting us as membership experts because we were, and because we were proving that we were. But a number of those almost immediately, I don't want to say switch alliances because that makes it sound tribal, that makes it sound like something it wasn't, but almost immediately, people who we'd been proving our expertise and we'd been building our credibility with and who were on board with us, all of a sudden started proclaiming this other person as the know-it-all expert in memberships because, $1,000 per referral is seductive, right? It's a pretty good incentive to proclaim someone else as the expert and all that. So that was upsetting. That was disappointing as well. A lot of people kind of revealed what their true motivation was. And I've got to be honest, that made me a lot more cynical about the online business world and the kind of people who were influential within it. Because, I've been around this online business space for a long, long time, since the mid-90s. I was not naive to the reality of some of the people who built their influence, some of the people who were touted as the top figures in their industry. I was not naive to that. It's all generated by money, right? And it is very much kind of a bit of a circle jerk. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'll promote your course. You give me affiliate commission. Then you promote my course when it opens and I'll give you affiliate commission. And so I knew that went on, but I don't know, maybe it's because people were responding as well as they had been to the different way we were doing things, the authenticity we were showing up with, the ethics that's at the heart of our business, that I just kind of assumed, okay, if they've gravitated towards us as membership experts and we are authentic, we are no nonsense, we are non-hype, I just didn't think that they would so easily back the other horse because that horse came with $1,000 affiliate commission. I didn't think people would sell out their ideals and their ethics like that, but people did. So that was demoralizing. It was also, it directly set us back because, we were making headway, getting on podcasts, starting to get the conversations going about speaking at events, and then all of a sudden you've got this tidal wave of noise that is proclaiming someone else who had just been a non-factor. They had absolutely been a non-factor. They hadn't been showing up and kind of giving advice or helping people with memberships really in the way, that we had. They didn't have that body of actual work as an expert. But all of a sudden, if the noisiest people are saying this other person is the go-to person, then of course people listen to that, people pay attention. And so the podcast we were wanting to get on, we were no longer in contention to get on there, because not only is someone else being touted as, this all-knowing guru, as the person you want on your podcast to talk about memberships, but also a lot of the podcast hosts were going to be affiliates for this course that was launching. And so, of course, they were rushing to get this person on their podcast so that it would line up with the promotions so they could make more affiliate commission. So it was just kind of disgusting to witness, and it did bother me for a long, long time afterwards. Tried to not to get too distracted by it, but it was really, really made me reevaluate relationships, reevaluate connections that we've been making in the online space. It took the wind out of our sails in terms of actually building that visibility, because all of a sudden, the McDonald's franchise had rolled into town. So yeah, that was hard. That was a real hard period, and genuinely thought about throwing in the towel, because it was a case of, okay, well, if authenticity and genuine expertise and doing things ethically, doing things the right way, if that is so unimportant in the grand scheme of things, this other individual isn't just going to come in, sell their course once and disappear. This is going to be built on, and of course it was. The strategy worked, and the McDonald's franchise flourished. And so that, in terms of assessing long-term prospects, it's okay, we know that now they somehow managed to carve out their space as someone who's at the top of the industry. And, they didn't devalue our space in it, but it was kind of, for a lot of people looked at it as there's Coca-Cola and there's Pepsi, right? This person came in and spent a lot of money and gave out a lot of commission to be the Coca-Cola, and now we were the Pepsi, and still a great spot to be in. Pepsi are a very successful company, but, it irks you. And so thought about throwing in the towel, thought about pivoting, and it wasn't because it took anything away from the success of our business. We continued to grow at a steady pace. In fact, the increased noise helped us, because what we actually found is when people realized that, this person who their favorite influencer was all of a sudden praising on their podcast was teaching memberships, but they were teaching it as a course that was costing $2,000. Well, that's insane. So of course, why wouldn't you teach memberships as a membership? And also $2,000 back in 2015. So those people then started doing the research to find a better alternative. They found us. We benefit from it. The whole saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, that applied. So it wasn't money being taken out of our mouths, but it was more so just how it took the wind out of our sails and how it made me feel about the industry, how it changed my perception of a lot of people I'd really looked up to and respected, how it did get in the way of our visibility and changed things there. But yeah, that was honestly a hard period, because we're not averse to competition. Competition's good. Competition means the market is thriving. But this person stands for everything we stand against. The way they do things goes against the way we do things. They are the antithesis of what we've done. Our ethics, our legitimacy, our whole approach and mindset is just so counter to everything that happened here. But other people weren't really seeing it because they weren't analyzing it. They were just following the hype. That was a hard thing to go through. That so early in the journey, less than a year in, we'd been showing up, working hard, podcasting, running the group, doing all of these things, doing it the right way, doing it the hard way. And then for this P.T. Barnum kind of figure to roll into town. Yes, that was not the greatest show. So that I definitely would say is one of the harder periods to go through, to not throw in the towel, to stick at it and to stay resilient. And I'm glad that we did, obviously, because that should never have been a reason why we changed course. And in fact, I think it was stubbornness. I think it galvanized me because it actually, it crystallized the exact kind of person that we are trying to kind of help the industry against, right? The kind of tactics, the kind of attitudes and mentalities that are outdated, that unfortunately, some people do still follow today, thankfully a much smaller number, but, there are still people who think that the kind of advice and the kind of approach coming from that part of the membership world is the way to do it. And so it gave us more of a mission, right? It wasn't just about helping people with memberships. It was about helping people navigate the hype, the bluster, the outdated, gimmicky, old school internet marketing sleaze. And it also kind of put a little bit of fire in my belly around, this online business world is a lot faker than I think most people recognize it as being. And so I'm not going to be fake. I'm not going to overhype stuff. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be raw. I'm going to do podcast episodes like this. I'm not going to, fall into the hype and promote the multi-$1,000 course, because of course we were approached. We were amongst the first people approached to sell this course as affiliates, which was an insult in and of itself, because anyone who's listened to the podcast for even 5 minutes would know this is not our vibe. But yeah, definitely one of the hardest periods. Still bugs me to this day. Just people who I'd respected just showed their cards when $1,000 of commission was on the table. But hey, that is the world of online business. And that was galvanizing. And honestly, I would say that there weren't too many difficulties really from that kind of 2016, 2017 mark all the way through to 2020. Because, things happened in 2020. Growth continued. Growth was great. Of course, running any business, running any membership is challenging. We definitely had challenges, but things that really stick out as hard to have dealt with, hard periods to go through, it was fairly smooth sailing all the way through to 2020 when COVID hit. Staying resilient when COVID hit was hard. We had big plans. We'd started going in a whole different direction, evolving the business. We'd announced software products. We'd announced other elements and other ways that we were going to help memberships and really build on that foundation we built in the academy. We had big plans to grow the team and all of that. And then, yes, COVID hit. Now, in the first instance, it was really hard because COVID also hit the household and totally, this was COVID at its worst. We're talking having to sit up to sleep because literally could not breathe. Probably should have been in hospital, but at the time hospitals weren't equipped. They weren't doing anything. They didn't know what they were doing. We didn't have vaccines. Got hit with COVID in January 2020. It was horrific. Totally wiped me out. I accomplished nothing. I did not work. I could barely function for a good solid month. How the academy stayed afloat during that time, I don't know, because I wasn't cognizant of what was going on. I was out of it. So that was hard. But I think the hardest thing from a business perspective was staying resilient, not panicking, not throwing in the towel, not changing course away from running the membership, because cancellations skyrocketed. They absolutely skyrocketed between kind of February and April of 2020, because of course they did. A lot of memberships saw that happen. A lot of people selling products saw sales drop, refunds spike. But of course, one of the first things people did when all this uncertainty hit, when the world was ending, was evaluate their finances, was cut costs, and subscriptions were the first place I think a lot of people looked. What were people paying for that they didn't think they'd be using? People didn't know what their financial situation was going to look like even just weeks ahead. Whether so many people lost their jobs, they were furloughed, their industries shut down, and it was panic. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody had time to think about anything other than just getting through. And yes, that absolutely hit us on a large level. And that was panic stations. That was, oh hell, do we need to just totally change our whole business? Because if this continues, like if that had continued at that rate, we wouldn't have lasted past the end of 2020. We'd have been lucky to get close to the end of 2020. So staying resilient, staying the course, simplifying was a big part of it. Really, really simplified. A lot of the bigger, more grandiose, more empire-building plans that had been in motion were shelved. I'd been working on a new software product that really, we'd announced at a conference. We held our first conference, Retain, live in September 2019, and that was kind of like a precursor to all these big things we were going to do. And all that exciting stuff, all of that optimism just disappeared. So yeah, we simplified, we refocused, we really just got to the core of, okay, like what are people going to need to get through this period within their memberships? And we just got back to the core, got back to the root of being problem solvers. And we put on hold the plans to increase the price of the Academy. The plan had been in place. We'd been $49 for, we went from $39 to $49, I think, back in 2016. And then we've been $49 for 4 years. So we had added so much value and so many new bells and whistles to the Academy, so many new courses and materials and resources that were never even conceived of when we started. So the value was immense. By this point, it was worth so much more than $49 a month. The plan was to increase that early in 2020, and of course, that got put on hold as well. So we made a lot of very fast decisions. We refocused, we shifted our attention towards what people needed during that time. We did everything that we could to help people to get through things financially as well. There were some members we comped their memberships so that they were able to keep things going. We ran promotions to enable people to join the Academy at a lower rate so that they could pivot their business towards a membership model. And ultimately, that is what happened, and that is where the bounce back happened, because a lot of people, some of the information we put out on how to pivot will have helped, but some people, they came to this of their own volition, recognized the opportunity to start a membership as an alternative to whatever they were doing before COVID hit. COVID showed them that their job could go away, right? So some people were a little spooked by the fragility of the way they'd been earning money to that point. Some people literally had no choice, like their job was lost, or their industry was wiped out, or their business was just rendered like irrelevant. So they pivoted kind of because they had to. And so that did lead to a rise of people joining the Academy for what it could do to help them essentially survive COVID themselves. Also, like online memberships, particularly in the hobby spaces, they definitely exploded during the COVID period too, because people had more time on their hands. They needed enrichment. They needed distraction. They started learning new things. They either use it as an opportunity to brush up on professional skills, or they use it as an opportunity to learn a new hobby, to get better at something that maybe they did years ago, and they're revisiting that now. They had time in their hand. And so, of course, that increased demand for solutions, for memberships. And so more and more people started setting up memberships. But there was that period. It was a good couple of months between the initial shockwave of COVID hitting and it becoming clearer what a pandemic world looked like while people were locked down, while jobs were gone, or essentially the world was on pause. So once things settled and people kind of had a better grasp of their bearings, then they started coming back. But also, there's some members who were never able to come back. Some people left for a month or two and then returned. But a lot of new people as well, new to the world of memberships. People like Jim Cooney, one of my favorite members at Membership Academy. I shouldn't play favorites, but we love Jim, and so do the other membership owners too. He worked in the performing arts. He worked on Broadway. That whole industry was just shut down. He pivoted and started a membership during the lockdown, and that's now his life. That's now his world. He was able to get through the pandemic, to survive, then to thrive, and now his lifestyle's different, his business is different, and he's still going from strength to strength 5 years on. So staying resilient when COVID hit, not overcorrecting, not panicking, not, I think also like not just staying static and thinking, okay, we need to just see this through. Like, we did make changes. We made deliberate changes that would purely because of COVID. Like, we reacted to it strategically, calmly, and with the hopefulness and the optimism that things would settle down, and that it wasn't literally the end of the world for the world or our business. But staying resilient when COVID hit, absolutely. But we settled into a nice smooth rhythm from there, because obviously the type of business that we run works in a pandemic, works in lockdown, as well as it, we didn't have to change anything about the core model really. But yes, that initial hit, it's almost redundant to say it was hard when COVID hit for the business, because it was hard for everyone. But yeah, that initial spike of cancels and not knowing whether that was a spike, whether that was a new trajectory and our business would survive long enough to be able to bounce back, that was really, really hard. And I think especially after so many years of stability, so many years of steady, stable growth, of going from strength to strength, of suddenly, like obviously talking about the setback of this kind of unpleasant element entering the membership world, that didn't set us back and stuff us in a corner somewhere. We were able to come back from that stronger, to get on stages around the world, get on podcasts that helped us reach so many more people, to really stamp our authority on the membership space. And our membership grew and grew and grew as a result of it. Steady, progressive, always trending upwards, and everything was building and everything was going great. And we got accustomed to that. And maybe you shouldn't. I don't think we were ever complacent or took it for granted, but it was stable times. It was real stable, no rockiness, no big setbacks, nothing hard to deal with. We were just doing our thing, and it was going well. So I think it wasn't just the impact of COVID. It was also first of all, the actual literally getting COVID right at the time where we needed our brains to be functioning to figure out how to navigate all this. That was hard. But I think it was almost that little bit of ring rust, right? Because we'd kind of been accustomed to it being boom time. So yeah, that was tough. One of the things that the pandemic and that whole period did inspire us to do was build a team. We actually started recruiting during COVID, and that led to one of the hardest things I've had to do in business, let alone within the membership. The very first person that we hired as a full-time employee, it just didn't work out. Some of it might have been our expectations. This was a person who was hired to be head of digital content, which obviously a lot of what we do is digital content. It was predominantly a marketing role, but they came with a PR background. They ran their own PR agency before coming to us. COVID and the pandemic had growing family, a new, young, growing family, had led them towards wanting the stability of employment. And that was kind of perfect because, they had the experience of being an entrepreneur. They'd had a membership. I mean, they were members of our site. It was also someone local. That was coincidence. I knew them before even becoming a membership geek. And so this was all great. So many elements lined up. I remember when their application first came in and I was blown away because I was like, oh, wow, I would never have thought they would even have applied for this. I thought they were running their own thing. So that maybe made us a little overexcited about what we could do and how they would function in the business. But also coming with a PR background was a nice added bonus. But it just didn't work out. So the PR background, we didn't get any PR on the back of it. Like we actually kind of outright asked, okay, great. So, what sort of PR opportunities do you think there are? Oh, I don't really think this is something we should focus on, which is nuts because there's so many opportunities for good PR around what we do, especially with COVID. Okay, how can we tell the stories of people who came through our membership who were able to pivot and, I'm just not really sure people would be interested in that, newspapers and press. So that maybe should have been a red flag, but there were just growing issues with performance, a lot of issues kind of coming in with laziness or perceived laziness, a lot of mistakes just increasing, work ethic just slipping. And so we had to fire our first hire. Now, this is the first time I'd had to do this, ever. Even in my former life in the banking industry, in management roles, I never had to fire anybody. So this was hard. This was hard conceptually and hard actually. Conceptually, it felt like a major failure. Like by the time that we had to fire this person, we'd hired 2 other full-timers, I believe, maybe even 3. I'm trying to remember the time frame. I'm not sure if we'd hired that 3rd person, but we had at least 2 other full-time members of staff. So, this wasn't just a kind of, okay, we'll just hire one person and we're good, or, okay, this is a failed experiment of building a team. We were building a team. It was coming together, and I think part of what led to it was actually seeing how well the other team members performed. And there's a little litmus test. I don't remember where it came from, but if you have a team, look at every person on that team and imagine what it would be like if everyone else in the company worked to the standard and the level that they worked. And we looked at the other 2 members of staff and kind of said, if everyone worked to that level, the business would be better. And so that's the exercise. Look at every member. If everybody worked like them, would the business be the same? Would it be better? Would it be worse? And so for everyone on the team, it was like it would either be the same, which is great, or it would be better, which is great. And then for this other person, the first person we hired, if everyone worked the way they worked, the company would be worse off. So yeah, that's a little, I like that. It's a good little thought experiment if you've got a team. But yeah, conceptually, it felt like failure. The first employee was, again, like it was the first step of a new strategic direction. It was the first step of, okay, going from entrepreneurs running a business and selling a product to actually selling a company, to actually being CEOs. And what that meant for the future, how we envisaged things being, that felt like a setback because, of course, you kind of think, okay, so it's fallen apart with employee number 1. Okay, how long until the other shoe drops on the other people in the team? Is this just what things are like? Are we constantly going to have this employee turnover? So that was really difficult conceptually. It felt like a step back. Also felt like they had kind of set our marketing back a couple of years through the low standard of what they've been doing. And absolutely, we attempted to keep this in check. We attempted to do everything right with this member of staff. But ultimately, it just didn't work out. The actual making them redundant was a nightmare because even though they'd been kind of warned, even though they'd sort of had probation extended, even though, we'd kind of discussed their performance, they seemed totally blindsided. So maybe that was part of the problem. They never thought there'd be any consequences to them just not working well. And they reacted like this was a total surprise, like they broke down. And it was unpleasant, it was ugly, it was horrible. They also kind of disparaged us a little bit to other people locally, to shared connections. And that wasn't nice to hear about as well, because we'd always kind of treated them fairly right up until the last and beyond, So that was hard. That was not pleasant. Thankfully, it's not something we've had to do since then. That first hire was in 2020, I believe, or it might be in the start of 2021. We've hired since then, and it's all gone great. Everyone's fantastic. We have a great team. So thankfully, not had to do that, but that's definitely one of the hardest things I've had to do as a business owner, let alone just as a membership owner. And then I think to cap it off, the most recent, and I've kind of done these in chronological order. The most recent is something that we talked about here on the podcast, something we shared, and something I'm sure a lot of you already know about. And that is when my co-founder, Callie Willows, stepped away from the company in early 2024. So that kind of came out of the blue. Actually, there's no kind of, that completely came out of the blue. Now, obviously, again, those of you who've been following us for a while know that there was a personal relationship between me and my co-founder, and that had broken down before she walked away from the company. But we kind of found a good rhythm of just working together. We'd always kind of had a distinct kind of skill set and distinct things we brought to the table for the company. Areas where, they preferred certain things, they were better at certain things, I preferred other areas. And so actually it was working, it was amicable. There was no big blow up. And so we were able to continue to work together productively. It took a little bit of figuring out some awkwardness around some things, but we actually found a decent rhythm where we continued to work independently, because honestly, for most of the membership, the majority of the things that we'd done, we did independently because we had different strengths, different skill sets. And so this was kind of just more of the same, right? There wasn't a great deal of things that required both of our heads to be on it at the same time. And so it was just some adjustments, and we had a good rhythm, and actually probably a better working rhythm than we'd had before, because it forced us to actually evaluate, okay, how do we work? How can it function? Who should be doing what? And we got more specific about what each of us would be doing within the company. And so I was actually able to focus a lot more on the high level strategy, a lot more on specific projects and initiatives, sales campaigns, particularly in the marketing area. And so we probably made some of the biggest strides forward for a long, long time within the months after things had broken down on the personal side than we had done in the years prior, because it kind of it pushed us into being more deliberate about what we were each doing and being more organized about that and all of that. So it completely did blindside me. In fact, this happened at the start of 2024. I'd had a couple of days out to just sit with a notepad and a pen to plan out the year on a personal level, but on a business level as well. And I'd mapped out essentially what 2024 was going to look like for Membership Geeks and for Membership Academy, obviously on the basis that it was the two of us working on it and running it. And then the day after I put these plans together, I got the email through from her saying that she wanted to take a sabbatical, a few months away, completely step away from the company, and then reevaluate whether she wanted to stay involved. We have kind of made ourselves have an honest conversation about whether it was just a break that they wanted, or whether they were suggesting a break because they thought it would be too difficult to say, actually, no, I want to get out. So it did turn out that actually, yes, they wanted to walk away. Some health issues to deal with, but also just kind of no longer interested in being in the business. It's difficult for them to be in the company, and they kind of got a little bit jaded and had other interests they wanted to pursue. And so, yeah, that turned into a huge unexpected blow and setback on a lot of levels, because they'd been more directly involved in the community for a good period of time while I had been more focused on the strategy side. So all of a sudden there's that, are people going to leave the membership because the person they connect more with out of the two of us isn't going to be there? There's also just the logistics of it. Like, there were two people working on the company, now there's just one. That's half of the workflow at the top of the organizational chart that's accounted for. So all of a sudden now I'm having to do a lot of other stuff that no one else in the business is doing. And those plans that I'd made, well, they can get ripped up. And so, yeah, there was a big impact. Now, this wasn't a case of her kind of just saying, okay, I want out, and then she never even, looked at the membership again. We agreed that there would be a transition period. There'd be a period where she would stick around and continue to do the things she'd been doing, that she would also be responsible for training up other people on taking over certain tasks and actually creating training reference material for them to do that. Some things that, she'd always kind of been insistent on doing herself personally that we probably should have outsourced or should have had another team member have them delegated to earlier. Now we kind of had to make up for that by making sure that we could train someone else on it. So it wasn't an overnight they disappeared, but the impact was immediate, especially on me, because yes, softens the blow of them actually helping with the transition for staff in terms of making sure the day-to-day was taken care of. But of course, I'm having to deal with this right away, and I'm having to pivot my plans and focus on survival. Just kind of not, that makes it sound dramatic. Like, I didn't think genuinely that everyone was going to leave the membership because this person was no longer involved. But it did mean that, certain things that I planned in terms of content that we were creating, features we bring back, new directions we might go in, suddenly we couldn't do that. And those were fundamental to ensuring the continued growth of the membership. And all of a sudden, right, okay, the things that I've determined are going to help us grow and adapt to, an evolving market, well, now we can't do them because I just don't have the time, because, we're dealing with all this, but also for the team, because of course, a co-founder leaving a company out of the blue, that's going to freak the team out. It's really going to freak the team out. And so I had to make sure that was handled correctly, had to figure out how to communicate this to the world, to our audience, how to think about the brand. The brand was always a difficult thing, because if this was just me, it would be Mike Morrison, membership expert, right? And if it'd been me from the start, it would be that simple personal brand. You'd get to know a bit more about me and your connection would be to me. But because there was two of us, we could never really do that. So it was always about a collective brand. And that was challenging. And I don't necessarily think we always got it right. The fact that most of this podcast has just been hosted by me. There was a little time we both hosted it. That was always a bit funny, but she didn't want a podcast. Wasn't really comfortable on video, preferred blogging. So that meant some content was just her, some content was just me. So the dual brand was always tricky, but we'd had 8 years of it. Or 7 years, however long it had been at that point. 8 years. 9 years, because it was 2024. Geez, losing track of time. So we'd had 9 years of this, where the business was not run by Mike Morrison. The business was run by membership geeks. And so all of a sudden, okay, how does a collective brand change now that one of the two people in that collective is gone? So the challenges and the things that we just never had to think about before suddenly landed on my plate. And that was exhausting. Honestly, 2024, a bit like the COVID year, had all these big plans about really kicking things up a notch and taking things to the next level. And poof, they're gone. The first 6 months, really. First 3 months were just about getting through it. The next 3 months was about steadying the ship. Then it was about, okay, how can we make sure there's continued growth in the membership itself? And then maybe then towards the end of the year, then we'll start look towards the future. And thankfully, we were able to get through it, and not just get through it, but to come out stronger, to come out a more unified team, to come out in a way that actually meant that, I think the members benefited from it. The Academy today is better than it was then, and that is not because my co-founder left. That is because it refocused, again, a bit like COVID did. It refocused my attention and the team's attention on serving our members, because that is the thing. When things start going wrong, when these hard things we're talking about hit, you can never go wrong just refocusing on your people, right? Refocusing on your members, why you're doing it for them, what they need from you, how you can best serve them. And so I know this has been a long episode. It's been a bit of a trip down memory lane, but I always like opening the kimono. I hate that term, but I always like pulling back the curtain a bit to show you the realities of running a membership business. And after a decade of doing this, it would be inauthentic to suggest that it's all been smooth sailing, because it absolutely hasn't. And so I hope just sharing these stories and being honest and being raw about how I felt, and, times when I thought about quitting, times when it looked like we were kind of screwed, and just the unpleasant stuff. I hope that, if nothing else is interesting, satisfies a bit of curiosity. But I do hope you've been able to take something away from it, whether it's inspiration to keep going if it feels like everything's lost. If you're dealing with something similar, you're having to, fire a staff member, or, a business partnership's broken down, or, you're having to make kind of an all or nothing decision, or you're worried about your competition. Like, hopefully this has given a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of comfort that you're not the only person who has to deal with this sort of stuff, that there are always brighter things ahead, and that, dealing with hard things is kind of just what we have to do as entrepreneurs. So I'm going to wrap things up there, because I appreciate this has ran quite a bit longer than the average Membership Geeks podcast episode, but I do hope it's been a worthwhile listen. I hope you have enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to be talking about more exciting things, more useful, more practical, more tactical things for you. I'm going to be sharing some of the key insights that I've gleaned from 10 years of running my own membership, and even longer of helping other memberships. So that is going to be packed with little golden nuggets, little interesting things from my own journey that will help you in your membership business. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you keep an eye out for next week's episode as we kick off this series of very special anniversary celebration episodes. I mean, every episode of the Membership Geeks is a must-listen episode, but for the next 6 weeks, we are doing a little bit extra special, a little bit more to mark the occasion. 1 decade. I like how I've said 1 decade. Like, of course, there's going to be 2 decades and 3 decades. Like, a decade of Membership Academy. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. And the best way of doing it is just by sharing with all of you folks and celebrating it with all our fantastic membershipers. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. Hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and tune in next week for my top insights from the last 10 years of running a successful membership business. I'll see you then. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Membership Geeks podcast, we invite you to check out membershipacademy.com. Membership Academy is the original membership about memberships, and it's the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a successful online membership business. Whether you're still trying to figure out what your idea is going to be and you need some help making it a reality, or whether your website is already up and running and you're looking for ways to grow and attract new members, then Membership Academy can help you to get to the next level. Not only do you get access to our step-by-step membership roadmap, our extensive training library, and exclusive member-only discount and tools, you'll also become part of our supportive, active community of membership owners that will help you along the way in your journey with feedback, encouragement, and advice. All of this and more make Membership Academy the #1 place to be for anyone looking to start, manage, and grow a successful membership business. Check it out and join the community at membershipacademy.com.